Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. It is 3 p.m. here in the UK and it is 10 a.m. Eastern time. And you're all most welcome to join us here at Zero Days Live. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. And guess what? It is show number 29 of the 40 that we committed to. So almost 3/4 of the way there. I hope you've been having as much fun as we have. In a few moments, we're going to be welcoming Shadi Razak, CTO and co-founder of Angoka, and also we'll be joined by show regular Gary Foote, who is Chief Information Officer of Haas F1. But before that, very quick look at what else we have this week, because tomorrow we're going to be revisiting the subject of CISO stress with a psychologist's perspective. On the CISO role, and also take a glimpse into the work being done by the Cyber Protect network to make us all more secure. And that will be on Thursday. And then finally, of course, we have our Fun Friday edition, where we're going to be embracing National Chocolate Chip Cookie and Pizza Party Day with esteemed journalist Dan Swinhoe from CSO magazine. So please do join us for that. Now, hello everybody, hope you're well. My name's Stuart Reed and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. And as usual, today, as with every other day, I am in the chair to welcome our range of special guests each and every day of our live shows. Nominet, of course, we're primarily known for managing the .uk domain space, which we've been doing now for over 23 years and have something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. Building on this strong heritage of understanding the importance of domain names for network connectivity, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks. And that includes providing service to the UK government's National Cyber Security Centre. And here at Nominet, ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do. And those principles are perhaps more important now than ever before, given the strange and ever-changing times that we're finding ourselves in right now. And with that in mind, we wanted to bring you an interactive show to bridge that gap that's potentially been left behind by all of those physical meetings and one-to-ones that are being paused right now. And so we thought we'd bring you 0 Days Live. And that's for everybody with an interest in or from within the cybersecurity community. Now, as regular viewers will know, I am joined both front of house and behind the scenes with a highly capable team, making sure everything runs just the way it should, albeit remotely right now. And speaking of remotely, that's what we all are. This week's burning question related to that is, what have you done differently in lockdown that you want to continue afterwards? So please do let us know by typing in the console on your right-hand side of your screen. Now, for me, I think it has to be about making eye contact and smiling more often to people. When I go out, I've spotted that everyone I pass, albeit at a safe social distance, seems to be far more friendly. And it would be nice to think that that continues outside of lockdown as well, giving everyone a bit of a smile and a glance to say hello. I think that's a nice thing to continue through. So I'd like to see that going ahead. Now, I know that completely kicks against Steve's wish to continue social distancing forevermore. And speaking of Steve, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Stuart. Now, just to set the record straight, whilst I still am going to maintain the social distancing, doesn't stop me from smiling or saying hello to people. I'm not rude, just, potentially want to stay away from people, that's all.
That's fair enough. I'm glad you clarified that for us, Steve. And it is very nice to see your bright, smiley face this afternoon. So tell us, Steve, what is it that you've done differently in lockdown that you're going to continue?
So as well as the social distancing, I've also started cycling a lot more. I had a bike that I got in my last company on the Cycle to Work scheme, and watching the show, but perhaps I didn't use it as often as I should have done for commuting to work. So it's good to get that out, get the cobwebs off of it, and get the cobwebs off of me as well by going for some nice bike rides. So going to continue with that post lockdown.
Oh, that's a really good idea, and I'm seeing a lot more people out on their bikes as well. I have to say I've also got a bike, but sad to say that it still does have the cobwebs on it. I've not quite dusted that one down yet, but I do go out for my permitted exercise and get a breath of fresh air every single day before the show, so we're all ready for it. So yeah, I think there's lots of positive things that are coming out of this that we should definitely be continuing as we move further forward. And everybody that's tuning in today, please do let us know what you want to continue past lockdown that's a bit different and that you've started. Please do type that into your console. Now, this show really isn't the same without all of you tuning in, and we're delighted that we're able to welcome regulars and new audience members every single day of the week as we continue to build up our accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, and of course, interject a bit of good humour along the way too. Now, with that in mind, we do cover a lot of important subjects here at 0 Days Live, but we don't take ourselves too seriously either. And just as a very quick reminder, in case you needed to know, for each of our 30-minute or so shows, we are absolutely and completely live each and every day. And as such, there is bound to be, and for those that have tuned in before, you have seen a few mild blips along the way. But of course, when they do happen, we hope you agree it's just part of the reason you tune in to see us. And also remember that whilst we are live, we do offer an on-demand service too, just for your convenience. So if you're not able to catch all of the live shows, or indeed just part of a live show, then you can pick it up at your convenience on demand by simply checking out nominetcyber.com/0dayslive. And please do, again, get involved. If during today's show or any of the other live shows that you join, you want to ask a question, give us a comment, please do so using that console on your screen, and Kerry will read them out during the webcast. And speaking of Kerry, how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you, Stuart.
Jolly good. Nice big beaming smile from you as well. So good to see you. So what have you done differently in lockdown that you want to continue afterwards?
Right, so yeah, you won't have noticed this because you are a boy, but every weekday during lockdown, I have worn a different pair of earrings. So I'm not saying that I will wear a different pair of earrings for the rest of my life outside of lockdown. But what I think I have enjoyed doing is having a bit of a variety and just changing things up a bit. So try and just bring a bit more variety into my life.
Very good. So forgive me, Kerry, because I hadn't realised that you'd worn a new pair of earrings every single day. Now, I did mention at the top of the show, we've done 29, or today is number 29. So that means you've got at least 29 different pairs of earrings. Is that right?
Well, I definitely have at least 40. Now, I will be keeping it up to my 40th birthday party.
Well, and we are all looking forward to our 40th. I think you'll agree. So I look forward. Now I'm aware that you're wearing a slightly different set of earrings every day. I will look out for that for the remaining 11 shows that we have at 0 Days Live. So that will give me something to do. Good stuff. Well, thank you for that, Kerry. Now, as I did mention a few moments ago, today we are welcoming two people into our virtual studios. Firstly, we got Shadi Razak, CTO and co-founder of Angoka, and we also have show regular Gary Foote, CIO of Haas F1. So welcome to our virtual studios, both of you. How are you today?
Yes, I'm good, Stuart. How are you?
Jolly good. I'm well, thanks. And Shadi, we've got there as well. Excellent. So the technology has not failed us on our live show today. So brilliant. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. Now, as you've heard, both of you, now, Gary, you'll be familiar with this, being our show regular. We do always ask a different question every week, a burning question, in fact. This week, it's what have you done differently in lockdown that you want to continue afterwards? So, Gary, what is that for you?
I think for me, a bit of a novelty is actually being able to eat all three meals with the family, you know, with work schedules, traveling, and things that's not always possible. So, you know, I really enjoyed that sort of breakfast, lunch and dinner as a family. And, you know, whilst I won't be able to continue it completely after lockdown, I'll certainly make a much more conscious effort to try and work the schedule around that. So.
Yeah, I think again it's interesting as we go through the week. It's only Tuesday, but we're exploring some actually pretty impactful things that we want to continue beyond lockdown. So I think that's a really positive thing for us to look at. Shadi, how about yourself?
Well, thanks, Stuart. I mean, for me, with the lockdown, a lot of friends that I haven't talked to and classmates that I haven't seen for a while. So it was quite interesting and exciting to have some time to do that, as well as keeping more time for the family, similar to what Gary has said, which, you know, in the day-to-day life, the usual one, you keep up running all day, and by the time you get home, everyone is, you know, asleep or busy with their lives. So that is brilliant.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that, Shadi. It's good that we've been able to really harness the technology that's available to us and drive some real positive gains through that. So I think that definitely is a step forward. Now, Gary obviously needs no introduction, being a show regular and CIO of Haas F1. But Shadi, your first time joining us, you're most welcome as well. So thank you for joining us. Perhaps you could give us a little bit more about what Angoka is all about and what you guys are really doing there.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. Well, thank you for the invitation. And, you know, it's a great show. I've attended a couple of the episodes there before, and I enjoyed it. For us on Angoka, we are an IoT security startup based from Belfast, with offices in London and planned offices in Japan. We embed trust into IoT communication. So our technology allow businesses to create trusted connectivity over zero trust networks, you know, protecting device identity, safeguarding the communication integrity, as well as the data provenance. And we do that across smart cities, critical national infrastructure, connected autonomous vehicles, airspace and defense, and that's our main focus of what we are offering.
And of course, you mentioned the kind of the smart cities and the interconnectivity with Internet of Things, or IoT, as well there, which of course is starting to really take shape and become a lot bigger now. We also talk about the term edge computing. So for you, how does that relate to IoT?
Edge, it's a quite a good question, actually. Edge computing is not a new term, right? We have it for a while. I mean, it's an evolution of the client-server type of communication or distribution of data networks for us. But as you said, the rapid growth of IoT and having more advanced smartphones and devices like autonomous vehicles, drones, etc., and smart cities, with the limitation that we have currently with the typical cloud system from a centralized, edge computing start getting more of the spotlight lately. And the beauty of edge computing is more of a topology. It's a distribution for computing topology. It's not a style of computing or a method. And the idea is to bring part of the offering that we have at the core, which is the cloud, to the edges, where people, things, and data are actually all merged, and try to provide it. So it is a continuum of the cloud. It's not a compete to it, but it's quite an important technology that we will see more of the hype cycle of it and adoption across, due to things like latency in decision makings, the bandwidth of data, you know, limited autonomy across networks, and most crucial parts of it is the privacy and security, because you will have multiple users and multiple entities using technology.
Okay, thank you for that. And actually, Gary, you know, from the conversations we've had previously, clearly IoT plays a big role in what you guys are doing in motorsport. You said before you've got something quite literally in the number of hundreds of different sensors on the cars doing lots of different things. So with that, how does edge computing come into what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think just as you say, that we've got you know, all those sensors all over the car, and they perform a bunch of different functions, from safety to reliability to performance, and it's all all that data is being generated to allow people to make decisions effectively in real time. So, you know, specifically at the track, that data comes into the garage, we distribute it round to our, you know, to the edge computing systems that we have at the circuit. And Shadi touched on there about latency and time delay, and they're things that we have to avoid at all costs. So, you know, the distribution of that data and thus the decision making based on that data has to be done in the quickest possible time because of the pace that the car's traveling at.
And you raise, you know, a good point in terms of the latency and having to make sure that that's removed from your perspective, Gary, in motorsport. And I guess actually, if you extend that, you know, the principle of IoT, and as we're talking about kind of the edge computing right now, it's still pretty much, you know, whilst it's starting to gather pace, it's still very much in its infancy. Shadi, from your experience, where do you see the biggest challenges around edge computing and IoT within the market right now?
From a challenges perspective, I would say two parts, which are security, and the second one is interoperability. From a security perspective, it's a different dynamics, because when you are talking about edge computing and IoT devices, we're talking about uncontrolled physical environments. So we're not just talking about the cybersecurity, but also people having the ability to access that computing power, you know, and try to manipulate it or tamper it physically, as well as the usual type of cyber attacks that we have. Not to mention the privacy issues, because now users are sharing their data, generating data and tracking and all of that. That becomes quite critical. Interoperability it's a wide problem that we all knows about. You know, the different communication channels that you are dealing with, different. And if you look on IoT, the other day I've read a study through Gartner that there's at least 35 standards for IoT communications, and those are the most commonly used only. So there's more than that. So it's quite interesting to see how much we can regulate or standardize into that in order to achieve maximum impact of edge computing and IoT.
And you touch on two really important aspects there. So the cybersecurity aspect and of course the interoperability there. Now, Gary, from your perspective, is this something that you would relate to in terms of the way that you're applying or the way that you're working with these kind of interconnected devices?
Yeah, I mean, the security of that data is paramount insofar as, and I don't think we differ to really other businesses here, when, you know, your data is what helps to, you know, define your business, and thus you have to secure it. And I think, you know, that move to IoT and intelligent edge devices and into, you know, edge computing, you've got a much more distributed data landscape. You know, when you're working in central servers, be that cloud or on-prem, you know, your data is in a much more controlled environment. As soon as you're starting to push that, you know, right to the far edge, maybe that's onto, you know, personal devices and that sort of era, then all of a sudden your data has a much wider landscape and your vulnerability is significantly increased.
And right on cue, it seems, we have our resident expert, Steve Forbes, joining us. So that usually for regular viewers can only mean one thing: he's got something insightful to share or to ask. So what have you got, Steve?
Yeah, so Gary, I was just wondering around the fact you said about all these sensors on your cars, and you talked about them from a kind of performance perspective. What specifically are the concerns around the cybersecurity aspect of those sensors? Why is that so important for you as a team?
I think in terms of the interception of that data, it's safety. So those sensors are performing critical function on the cars that have multiple lives at risk. So, you know, in the same way as you know, we talked briefly about autonomous vehicles, but also in aerospace and these other industries where real-time data has a safety element, then you have an obligation to protect that, because without it, then, as I say, you're putting lives at risk.
Absolutely, it's interesting because you kind of immediate thought process behind that is around protecting it from the competition, when clearly there's much more of a focus on life and the health of your drivers and everyone around them that is the main focus. It's interesting. It's a different.
There's the competitive side of it, and absolutely we take that very seriously. But there's not just competitors. There's you know, and you guys know this better than anyone. There's the malicious activity aspect of it. But all of that, you know, number one, you know, when we're grading any of these sort of concepts that we're looking at, or layers of security we're putting in, we're always putting safety first. You know, car performance and reliability come after.
Absolutely, it's great to hear. And Shadi, how do you see the security around edge computing and IoT evolving in the future?
Quite an interesting question. I mean, one of the main things that we will see more of change around is the pyramid or the holy grail in security, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, will change a little bit, and it will go upside down, where availability and integrity becoming the top and the more focus. Because as we talked, and as Gary said earlier, if you are applying IoT and edge computing, and most likely I'll look at it into real life implementation beyond your smartphone and downloading and streaming videos. But if we are talking about smart grids, you know, taking care of water pumps and our network of water, and how that information, you need to know the sensors of the level of the water or the cleanness of the water. How important is that? Because easily, if you manipulate it, you can poison or flood the city. Now, where it's important becomes the availability and the integrity of the data, the availability of the information at the right time when you need it, because there's no time for you to think about. You need to make quick decisions, as well as the integrity. And where it's become more important, the usual type of or typical security that we see at the moment for IT system need to move away from it, because now we're talking about a hybrid type of environments where you're getting physical and real IT. And that's where I think the change and you know, and a lot of standards start alluding to it, and a lot of regulations are being discussed or directive across Europe and in the US, is about moving the root of trust into that communication and the identities to the hardware, to the devices, instead of just building on software as a security layer, because you need a last line of defense eventually. And that's where moving that trust, or the root of trust, to the device itself and the hardware is going to be a huge market.
And I guess that's even more relevant when we're talking about things like autonomous vehicles. And I know your company works really closely in this field. Could you give us an overview of what the main security risks are with autonomous vehicles and how you might counteract those?
I think the main risks factor, which is what Gary alluded to, is safety. And I think that's where the focus. So we work with the connected and autonomous vehicle authorities here, and DCMS and NCSC, regarding security for autonomous vehicles in the UK. And where we're looking at is not risks as your Ford is being stolen. That's something that's a insurable risk. But where we are looking at someone taking over a fleet of vehicles, or provide vehicles on the M25 wrong information, so they end up in a collide or an accident or a traffic jam. And that's where communication, it's important, but also the idea of protecting vehicles from being spoofed, or the critical infrastructure being spoofed. So in the sense as of the attacks that we have seen for Jeep Cherokee or Tesla, you know, last year, etc., of someone trying to use the normal communication, the drawbacks in the software that is running, or the operating system that is running on the vehicle, and taking control of the vehicle. And I think we need to start looking at building, and some of the organizations across the world, you know, the big OEMs and the manufacturer are starting to look at it. We're building that layers of defense, and, you know, defense by depth into the vehicle itself, from, you know, the components that sit on the vehicle, to the software that runs on the vehicle, to the communication, to the infrastructure or the cloud or other vehicles. So it's a multi-tier in that one. I think that the trickiest part in the future for autonomous vehicles is adoption. And people, funnily enough, latest studies that highlighted security is between the top 5 concerns. Actually, the main concern is people trust in technology. Do I trust to let that, AI drive the vehicle and I'm not doing anything? And I think that will take some time to build that towards it.
And actually, we talk about autonomous vehicles more and more now, and we touched on it in terms of the sensors that are in cars. Gary, being a big car fan yourself, Gary, what's your view on autonomous vehicles? Will we see those in F1?
I've kind of got an internal battle on the topic, really. I mean, I'm a petrol head, and but I also own an electric car. I don't know, driving is a real pleasure for me. It's something that I enjoy. It's a very pleasurable activity for me. But the flip side is I'm also a technologist, and I truly believe that technology empowers society and it improves efficiency. And there are risks, as Shadi mentions. There's plenty of risks involved, but I also think you're actually just shifting risk from one area to another. And as long as people adapt to that, I absolutely think it has a place. In terms of personal sort of mobility, I'm not sure I'd adapt it straight away, but I would have said the same about electric cars when I was driving a 6-litre V8, 5 years ago. So, and here I am with an i3 on the drive.
Well, there we go. How times change, hey? So thank you both for your insights there. Kerry, I'm sure that there are questions coming in from the audience around this as well. So what we've got?
Yes, there absolutely is. So first one is to Gary. So we expect 5G to have an impact on IoT, but what do you think the impact of 5G will specifically be on F1? That's from Seb.
I think 5G will bring down some of the connectivity barriers that we have. I mean, as a general rule, we perform most of our racing functions in a core environment without a connectivity to the outside world. We're very shy of the cloud purely because of some of those challenges that we were talking about before in terms of latency and what have you. But 5G is going to open up connectivity doors, and critically for us as well is that makes its way to some of the more remote locations that we race in. We race all across the globe. And if the world can embrace 5G and that network is truly global, then as a sport we'll benefit that for sure.
Brilliant. And then Shadi, we've got somebody asking about. So you mentioned early on in the talk about people, technology, and data. Where do you think that the biggest risk actually lies? And that's from Jessica.
Well, it depends, and it will vary between different use case and use case. But I think when we are talking about edge and IoT, the focus will be more on the technology, not the risks are not the people in that sense, because you're talking about people using their devices or certain machinery to do a specific function as it is. So the risks becomes of the resilience of the machine and the software that is running on it and the hardware that is built on it. In that sense, I think because we've reached a solid points regarding people, and the risks in that environment is different for people that we don't have yet a clear view of it, because we don't have a lot of use cases that are quite common. As Gary have said, autonomous vehicles will be adopted, but what will be the people risks towards autonomous vehicles, that is something yet we have early signs of it, but it's not well documented or well analyzed in that one. So I'll go for the early few years, it will be mainly the technology till we build that trust in the technology.
Right. And then what is the security risk of IoT devices in the home? That's from Dave.
Beside melting your ice cream, it can have actually real impact. Smart meters are heavily attacked lately across Europe and everywhere, from what they call it penny scrimmage. So they try to represent different type of readings. So they pass their electricity spending to you, but also the same way if you are using solar panel and you are generating electricity, they try to show that you are generating less and they are more, so they get paid more. And there's also a lot of privacy towards the household and the people who are living at it. And we are seeing in the chatter and in the dark web a number of organized crime that they are using that information to be able to steal houses, vehicles, etc., depending on the usage and knowing people, are they in the house or not.
Great. And then finally, this one for both of you, a crystal ball moment. How far away from autonomous vehicles being mainstream are we?
From my side, I would say it's getting quite close. I mean, we've got a lot of very pioneering and aggressive companies on the landscape at the moment, and they all want a piece of that pie, and it'll probably be a very big pie when it does become mainstream. And so there'll be, as I say, there'll be risks involved, but it'll come down to where that risk becomes a manageable level. It will never be risk-free, but then neither is driving a regular car. So it comes down to a point at what point society thinks that the risks are now acceptable.
I agree with Gary. I know a number of car manufacturers that they are, pushing the pedal towards 5 years from now. Whether that's going to happen, not sure. I would say between 10 to 15 years, because there's a lot of requirements need to be put in place, or prerequisites like infrastructure, connectivities, legislations. But it is going to happen. It will happen.
Great, thank you.
Good. Well, as always, great questions from the audience and insightful feedback from our guests. It's a fascinating subject, this one, guys. I mean, IoT is something that is really starting to gain momentum in the industry and in the marketplace, and drive value as well, quite literally. So, the aspect of edge computing, clearly there is something that that's probably more revolutionary and perhaps slightly in its infancy around there, but the two intertwined, clearly we're going to see more of that in the future. So thank you both very much for your perspectives on that right now. Everybody tuning in, that was Gary Foote and Shadi Razak joining us today. We're almost at the top of the show now, but before we do leave, I'd like to just hand back to Kerry for a quick wash up of today's news. Kerry, what have we got?
Great, thank you. So Information Security Magazine reports that only 19% of people working from home update their antivirus. The report also discovered that only 45% were working on a secure device provided by their employer. The FT is warning that many companies are turning to Big Brother style security surveillance tools to stop staff from leaking or stealing sensitive data. Due to many employees working remotely and some being laid off, staff are becoming more disgruntled. And Forbes is saying that it's an interesting article on business that's needing to flatten the curve when it comes to cyber attacks around COVID. So that one's worth a look.
Interesting stuff. Thank you, Kerry. And again, this it's all new news, but it's a lot of stuff here is underlining earlier conversations that we've had throughout all of these shows so far, all 29 of them, in fact. A lot of it comes back to getting the basics right. 19% of people working from home are updating their antivirus. It's one of those basic hygiene things that everybody needs to be doing. So it's interesting that this starts to underline the point that while cyber attacks can become more and more sophisticated, they actually don't need to be that sophisticated to cause harm and to be successful if the basics aren't there. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of those highlights and things like you said that we've talked about before. And the main thing here is that obviously organisations are having to do things they wouldn't normally do in terms of allowing remote working. And we talked about kind of making sure you're recording those risks and you've got a plan in place to mitigate those risks going forwards. And I think none less so than users having to use their own devices. I mean, that's obviously a huge risk if you're letting them onto your network with their own devices in the first place. But then, and as you said, it's kind of one of those basic hygiene factors, and as part of cyber essentials, have a standard configuration. Your antivirus should be on, and it should be auto updating, and all those kinds of basic things we've talked about before. If you haven't got those basics right, then there's no way that you can be able to protect yourselves. And I thought that FT thing was interesting, because I wonder how many of those organizations are really or were monitoring their employees for this type of activity when they were in the office as well. And I think maybe part of it is a psychological thing that I can't see my employees, I can't see what they're doing, therefore that there may be a greater risk. But how many of them had fully deployed data loss prevention tools and other tools like CASB solutions to kind of highlight that sort of stuff? I'm pretty sure not a lot of those organizations would have done. So it's interesting they're more fearful of it now than they were previously.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to the point of visibility, because as you say, kind of the standard acceptable use policy probably covers things like that in it already, but maybe there's the kind of the psychological comfort factor of all of your employees being in a single place at a single time, and therefore having better visibility, whereas being slightly more dispersed or working remotely, then there's perhaps more of an appetite to try and get a handle on what's going on. So yeah, it is an interesting perspective, and again, these are all very interesting things that we're seeing as part of this this pretty strange situation that we're finding ourselves in right now. So more of that, I am sure, for the remainder of our shows that we've got as well. So yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that, Steve. Well, everybody, that is it for today. A very special thanks to our guests today, Shadi Razak, CTO and co-founder of Angoka, and our very own show regular, Gary Foote, CIO of Haas F1. Everybody here, front of house, thank you very much, and also behind the scenes, of course, at 0 Days Live. And of course, for all of you all for tuning in to see us as well. Tomorrow, remember, we're going to be revisiting CISO stress again, so please join us then. Have an excellent rest of the day and see you again soon. Thank you very much and goodbye.